Well, thank you very much for asking me to speak. My name is Nick Fox. I'm a consultant neurologist, and my special interest is in dementia, and I direct the Dementia Research Centre, which is very much clinical and research and educational all linked together. So I just thought in the few minutes I had, I would tell you a little bit about the sort of 100-year journey. The Dementia Research Centre hasn't been around that long, but that's when Alzheimer himself over here described the disease that now bears his name. That's his first patient, and that actually is her handwriting, which was retrieved almost about 10 years ago from the medical records department. We have trouble sometimes getting records from the last week, so I was very impressed. It just shows what German efficiency does for you. And he described these characteristic and now the hallmark features of Alzheimer's disease, what we know Alzheimer's disease, and the brain shrinkage. These are a particular protein called amyloid, and I'm mentioning this because I'll come back to that. And this is the devastating loss of brain volume that occurs in Alzheimer's disease. And Alzheimer's disease is only one of a number of causes of dementia. And it really is the public health problem that is, I think, perhaps most pressing for societies like the UK. There are 800,000 people with dementia at the moment. That's it. That's an estimate. Alzheimer accounts for about 50% of those. I was just mentioning before we came in, we were talking about the fact that in the last 5 to 10 years, for adults, dementia is now the most feared health condition, having overtaken cancer. And one of the reasons for that is that we lack any effective disease-modifying therapies, anything that will actually slow the disease or stop it. It is a major cause of disability in residential care. Its incidence is very age-related, so it doubles with every 5 years over the age of 60. So twice as many people get it per year if you're 65 compared to 60-year-olds, twice as many again at 70, twice again. And you can see with that doubling why aging populations are so much at risk for this condition. The life expectancy of a child born in London this year is approaching 100 years, in which the expectancy of dementia is more than 50%. So unless we do something to delay or stop the progression, the onset of these diseases, the numbers will just go up and up with major implications for the individual but also for society. And this is sort of shown here. These are sort of numbers around about now, 2012. I don't think we all go from grey to green to blue over the next 40 years, but these are just to represent the sort of numbers that we can expect. Actually, at the moment, women are particularly, this is a disease that affects women disproportionately because they end up being the carers. They also live longer and they get more dementia. In this room, more than 1 in 3 of us will develop dementia, and more than 1 in 2 of us will care for somebody. So this is just showing those in a sort of more graphical way. Current cost is 23 billion to the UK, a quarter of hospital bed occupancy, 3/4 of those in residential care, and half of us, as I said, will care for someone. And as a result, it really has become a global challenge and a global problem. And I think Queen Square was pleased to host David Cameron in the launch of his Dementia Challenge in 2012, and Jeremy Hunt, who's also there in the picture, when he came a visit before the Dementia Summit in 2013. So what are we going to do about this? And really, thanks to the National Brain Appeal, we have put together within one site and with the specialist scanning facilities, we've got a coordinated program of research which has the generous funding, has come up with new genetic causes and influences. We've developed new diagnostic measures, new imaging techniques, and these techniques have been used to track progression, which have been used in the largest worldwide trials of dementia. So coming to Queen Square have been scans from 60 centres around the world for their images to be analysed. And we're moved towards treatment trials and now prevention trials. So just to highlight just a couple of those things, one of our particular strengths and interests has been to focus on young onset, unusual and familial dementias. And really, that's a minority of cases, but there are over 20,000 people with dementia under the age of 60. And what we feel is there's a clue in that. I mean, that's devastating for families. But there must be something extremely important that means that a disease that normally affects people when they're 80 can come 20 or 30 years earlier. And there's a clue there for the rest of the disease, and that's one of the aspects that we are targeting. And we've recruited probably the largest collection of families with these diseases, perhaps in the world. And these families were described really since the 1920s, but they give an option to have an insight into the disease, because the individuals in the family who know they're at 50% risk of getting this disease at the age of 30, 40 or 50 are incredibly generous, and they take part in longitudinal studies that allow us to pick up the earliest changes, and that's what historically we've been doing. What I will end on is saying that we are turning that a full circle now in that treatment trials are starting for those very generous families. So we know that by the time somebody's diagnosed, certain areas, this is an area to do with memory in particular, may already be 20% down. So that's given us a clue that it's a long pre-symptomatic phase. And these are scans, these are new scans that have just come around in the last 10 years that pick up those proteins that Alzheimer, amyloid proteins that Alzheimer discovered 100 years ago. And these are somebody carrying a gene who's asymptomatic, who already has, in these bright colours here, heavy deposition of the amyloid protein. So we have been following people who don't necessarily know the genetic status, like this individual, but who's absolutely convinced they're becoming affected. That's their first scan, that's their second scan, no change over a year. But we also see individuals like this, first scan, second scan. And I think you can probably see the dramatic loss of brain tissue in just a year. These are devastating diseases. And we can put that graphically as a long pre-symptomatic period after which there's this up to now inexorable decline, which gradually accelerates. And we, having done serial imaging, what you're seeing here is the first imaging ever of the onset of Alzheimer's disease, something that Alzheimer couldn't do, so that you are tracking with multiple scans the very first changes. And combined with genetic and biomarker studies, we're trying to look into which influences are most critical and what we can do to track disease and, most importantly, to prevent it. The idea being we can see people's change, we can institute therapy, and hopefully prevent, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I certainly would prefer my therapy when I'm only a little bit more forgetful than I am already, rather than when I'm bedbound or mute. And so finally, after more than 20 years of our studying it, but over almost 100 years of familial Alzheimer's disease being recognised, we have got the first trial starting, and they will be starting in the Dementia Research Centre as the only UK centre next month here, which is a fantastic story for the generosity of these families whose commitment gave us the first genes and gave us the first mechanisms and then the first treatments. So it's great that they're finally going back into that. So in conclusion, there's a long prodromal period. That's a window of opportunity. We can detect and track early progression, and we're finally going to be doing something about it. And that really is all thanks to the foresight and the generosity of the Brain Appeal. So thank you very much. Wouldn't have been possible without it.